Alrighty. Hello, everybody. Today we're gonna go talk about Bard and support with the new meta after the PTR change. So the goal of this particular video is you look at this and now you guys have a knowledge of how you guys should build your Bard or you guys should build your support properly and just adjust it based on your preference. Because sometimes some builds are really wrong. It seems like it works. It's because it's really hard to know if you're doing a good job or not as a support, because this game is really poor telling you if you're doing a good job, right? What will we cover? I just talked about it. Supports 101 again. Maybe it could be 102. It says what's the role in this game? What do I look for when building it? And the current meta as well, right? So it's going to be Spec versus Swift and what kind of builds are there too. It will give you the knowledge you need to adjust your build when meta changes in the future. So for example, when another PTR change comes out and another support is changed, after this, you guys will know exactly what to do if you understand. Hopefully I can teach properly here. Keep this in mind. What attributes should supports focus? So you have damage buff, you have shield and heal care, and you have identity generation, right? So if you have identity generation, these kind of things link towards damage buffs and shield heal care, because the faster you generate, you can activate your courage or you can activate your heals faster. So the faster you generate your identity gauge means you can rotate buffs faster. But if you focus too much on the identity generation, your damage buff rotation and shield care tend to be lacking. That's why you have to find a real good balance so that everything kind of lines up with the DPSs that you play with. With this particular information in mind, you have to remember uptime is the most important thing. Then identity generation. This is how I feel about it. Let's say you have Ignition Sorceress and then you have like a Gunslinger in a team. They all have different random points where they're strong and they have different random points they're weak. Therefore, if you have 100% uptime, which is something like a Paladin, which is what he excels at, the whole team will generally do more damage because your uptime is much higher. And the better support you are, the higher uptime you have. And this is what I said here. Mostly you have no idea who and what class you're playing with. So it is hard to match party members' burst times and whenever they're dealing their strongest damage, right? Second point. What is important to keep in mind for Bard? You have 100% uptime on attack buffs here. You have the most two important skills, right? You have the Heavenly Tune here, and then you have the Sound Vibration here. These two skills give you buffs. But Sound Vibration, though, is you have to step on it, right? You have to step on it in order for you to get the buff. So this is a problem, because let's say you're playing a Hitmaster class, and your class is, this guy's like here, and then the other guy's like here, and then let's say the Entropy class is like here. Then you actually have to choose one. You have to choose one and then give the sound vibration buff to whichever the class that there is in. What's important here is when you use your Heavenly Tune here, it's 8 seconds. So when this 8 seconds runs out, it's usually 0.9 seconds to activate sound vibration like this. So you get that buff right away. And by the time this runs out, you use your Heavenly Tune again to get that 100% uptime. You can just put this as sound vibration as a filler before your rotation of the Heavenly Tune, right? So you have to keep this in mind, okay? I'm pretty sure most of you guys know this already. So that's the attack buffs. And now we have 100% uptime on marking. So what marking is, you have two options now in this meta. So you have Sound Shock. Most of you guys are using it right now in NA because this skill is like pretty universal. Fire here, and this is the marking. You guys see this all the time, right? This is called a single marking. Now, after the PTR change, we have something called the double marking, where if you have the harp is generated and it's attacking also pretty far too. So this harp is keep attacking it for that marking. Pretty cool part is if you have enough swiftness and you have enough tripods to keep that up, you can actually keep all your marking up with just one harp. But the problem is if the boss is like running away all the way over there, the harp won't be able to reach. Therefore, you gotta miss a little bit of time on marking. That's why we have this new skill called Sonatine, right? It's called Sonatine. This skill, it gives you destruction. It gives you a little bit of stagger. The tripod for cooldown has a tripod for marking, and it has a tripod for additional Serenade meter gain. right? So this thing lasts 4 seconds. So let's say the harp is like super far away. It's attacking a little bit. Usually harp attacks about 5 to 6 seconds guaranteed because the boss doesn't actually move that much. That's why you mark it with the other skill Sonatine, which only has about 8 seconds with proper swiftness and gems. It's going to fill it up. It's going to be using it as filler, right? This is called double marking, where you have 2 skills that is dedicated for marking. Now out of the 3, you can use anything. This is preference. Are you going to use 2 skills for marking? Or are you going to use 1 skill for marking? But whichever the goal is, you have to have 100% uptime. If you don't have 100% uptime, it is a problem. I'm going to give you an example. If you do a single marking on a spec build, Sound Shout, you can't use it as a spec bard because 2, 1, 0, and then you have to use it again, right? 2, 1, 0. It's barely hitting it, right? But what if you actually miss it? And also at the same time, when you're casting Sound Shock, you're much slower, right? So you're stuck in this animation. That's another downside for it. So you just need to keep in mind when you're building your own bard, what's my 100% uptime marking and what's my 100% attack buffs. Now let's go to the next category, uptime shield. Now uptime shield is these 2 skills. Guardian Tune when the music is pretty important. Some people actually don't know that it is important to rotate as much as you can. So some people do it that way, right? So you have it here and then you have your shield up and then you can activate your buff for the defense reduction, and then after this 8 second is done, you get additional shield for it, right? So you get this shield after for 8 seconds, and then you can keep on adding shields on top. So Bard is the #1 class that has a best shield care because it has 100% uptime on shields. So real good Bard is they kind of know where all the characters are, but the best point is just go to the back, and then if you use your With the music, you'll probably hit most of the entropy classes. Hit master classes though, it's a little harder, but sometimes if you go around and you see an ally here and then you see a boss here, kind of want to hit it together because this generates a lot of meter as well. All right, these are some basic stuff, but this is the thing you need to keep in mind. So 3 categories, right? Keep in mind on the uptime on attack buffs and uptime on marking and uptime on shields. This is the same thing for all 3 supports. So if you guys are playing Paladin, what are my two attack buffs? Oh, what are my marking skills? And what are my shields? If you think it that way, you can kind of come up with the mandatory skills to about like a 6 to like 5 skills in your mind. And then what you do is you fill the rest of it with preference skills, which is usually gather identity for juice or counter. That's the basic fundamental thought process of making a support build. The reason why I went over this first is because to help you guys understand why this build, full swift, high swift, and full spec, and why is it built that way. You have full swift version, which is 1800 swift and then 600 spec. And if you have enough accessories that are decent quality, this is the number that you're going to be close to. The efficiency is like just written down here. And then you have the second version, which is high swift, which you guys always ask me on chat. The reason why you guys are asking me this is because it's cheap. Spec accessories are much cheaper, so therefore you kind of want to adjust rings or earrings to spec so that you can save some money and hopefully not to lose on performance. And it's actually true. You don't actually lose that much more performance, but each criteria of the build have pros and cons, and which we're going to cover that as well, right? Now, the one thing that you guys have been always asking me about on my live stream, the full spec version. This is the opposite version of full swift, as in you put all spec and then swiftness. So you got the heal efficiency and courage efficiency as the highest as you can. It's more than double, right? So it looks good by paper, but the problem is if you put your swiftness down to 600, your Heavenly Tune becomes 18 seconds, even with level 9 gem. Is if you go full spec and below level 7 gem or even level 7 gem, that's a wrong build. Because if you have a level 7 gem, it's 18 seconds, like 18.5 seconds, right? You have over 10 seconds of window to cover up things. So even if you put in the sound vibration when it just finishes, how much time would you have to wait? You would have to wait 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. You wait for so long. So all that empty time frame, it snowballs up so much. And that's also why Spec Paladin or Spec Artist is even worse than Spec Bard, because their spec efficiency is much lower. Let's say for someone like Paladin, their cooldown is so much longer. You're going to have an even bigger downtime between the two buffs. I wanted to point out that this is very important for you to understand that full spec doesn't really mean good. It's just you need to know what the pros and the cons for it to completely understand. Now, I'm going to talk about it more on detail now, okay? Now let's go over the full swiftness build. This is the build I play. So this particular build, when you have new swiftness and then you have the new skills, which is Sonatine, you have the highest uptime on all attributes now. You can have the highest uptime on the buffs. So for example, I can use Heavenly Tune. This will come back so fast to a point that I can actually use my sound vibration when it's at 1 second or even 2 seconds. Because before this thing runs out, my Heavenly Tune comes back. There is so much room of comfort keeping the buffs up 100% of the time. But the more swiftness you have, the easier this is. The less swiftness you have, the harder this is. You can just keep that in mind. That's why I put it as most reliable play. It's so easy, it's hard to make a mistake rather. You have full movement speed without yearning because of your full swiftness, and full attack speed with Heavenly Tune. So if you added Heavenly Tune on, your attack speed is going to be full. Therefore, some people, when I was playing this in a con, they were saying, oh, why is my Prelude of Storm so fast? That's because my attack speed is full, right? Attack speed is actually important in support, is because you can squeeze in a lot of skills in a very short time frame. By far, best for tri-parties here. So this is an example of 100% shield uptime for DR as well. If you have a raid that doesn't require CC immune, that's just like a clown or something. Guardian Tune has another tripod that says this is a fast casting. This lasts 8 seconds, right? 8-second buff, and then 8-second shield, right? If you enable this particular tripod here, it becomes 4 seconds, and it becomes 4-second shield, right? So a very popular tri-party build, you cast E and D together, and then when this runs out, this becomes the shield, and then when it comes back, you cast it again. So you have 100% shield. This is a very popular build. So with this new add skill addition, identity generation got a lot better too. It's from 28 seconds to 32 seconds from 0 to 3. So what this meaning is, if I add in another skill called Stigma, the third tripod in the second row, because this thing will home and follow. The point is to gather your meter. So it is a really good choice to use it. Now if I gotta show you an example here, right? You put your marking, and then you use your biggest gain skills, right? Which is your Prelude of Storm, right? And then you just keep using it. Right? This is full swiftness right there. And then you keep rotating your 2 buffs while you're doing it as well. And then you can rotate your shield too if you want. And then by the time you do your last couple of cycles, you should be about 3 bubble. You should be about 3 bubble at 28 to 30 seconds, 32 seconds, right? What does that mean? Like, as in, if you use your 3 bubble, which will last 16 seconds, you have about 16 to 12 second downtime. As in, you can actually gather a lot of meter for 12 seconds, which it aligns with majority of the classes. For example, Ignition Sorceress, right? They usually take about 16 to 20 seconds. This is all different for particular classes. When I asked Wine Blue about Artillerist, he said if he plays it perfectly, he can transform in 10 seconds. So it kind of aligns with it. That's why you need to coordinate to make Wine Blue maybe transform every 12 to 14 seconds to give him the 3 bubble buff every time he transforms. So this is a good idea. Keep in mind that how much do I generate on average, and then you know that the buff lasts in 16 seconds. You keep attack buffs and shield buffs up and you're good, right? You're Gucci. So all this stuff is so good and it's very lax in mistake. I just ran this build in a con. The meter was filling so fast. I was doing 1 heal bubbles very, very quickly. Having this full swift build, it will grant you the best performance with the least amount of skills involved, which is easy to master, easy to get expert at too. Now the con section it's most expensive out of the three because you need swiftness accessories. And I know how much expensive swiftness accessories are. It lacks mana. Therefore, when you guys ask and when you guys think about how can I figure out mana? How can I figure out mana, right? The reason why I don't use Sound Shock is because Sound Shock uses more mana. Therefore, I'm using 2 marking skills. And then you have Conviction Judgment rune as well. So you have the Conviction and then you have the Judgment. The last step of the choice is Mana Food. If you don't have Mana Engraving, these 2 are mandatory. As far as I know, most people are taking maximum mana right now, the max MP engraving. I took it. I think it was like the greatest choice I did, because if your max MP increases, since the recovery itself is percentage based, you don't run out of mana enough. This build is not troll anymore. As long as you have your 100% uptime on attack buff, 100% on shields, and then your identity gauge gains up super fast and gives you all the identity buff at the same time, like as much as you can, you are doing your job, right? Drops of Ether and Vital Point, I think they're extra. The Vital Point itself just help you to guarantee a higher chance of success in stagger checks. It's a high Swift build. So after I tested out a little bit, this is a great uptime as well. And it's slightly faster identity generation. I tested it out. If you get level 3 set bonus, you still have max movement speed. As long as your movement speed is over 120%, you will be max movement speed. And now when I use Heavenly Tune, I'm at 122 right now, right? If I use Heavenly Tune, my attack speed is 138. So it's a little slower, right? But it's still good enough. 138 versus 140, they're like exactly the same. You can also cover that with attack speed, movement speed, feast if you want. But most people take the HP one so that you can heal more. But besides that point, since you have additional spec that you can move around with, you have a lot faster identity gauge. But this is counting the higher level gems, by the way. So if you happen to have level 7, it's 15. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, now. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then you have about that much empty frame. But if you have a level 9 gem, there you go. If you have a level 9, it'll be much better. You up there, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. There you go. And then 1, 2, 3, 4. You have exact. It's exact if you have like level 9 gems. If you have level 10, it's even better. But I want you guys to understand that more swiftness you have, the easier it is to rotate 100%. That's what you guys need to understand here. And since you get that discomfort of rotating 100% of the time, you get more efficiency for having more spec on efficiency on the courageous buff and the identity generation, right? But if you have high swift to begin with, what's important is level 7 is like what most people have. It's not that hard to get level 7s. If you have a level 7s at the full swiftness, you will have 100% uptime. And then you have the a high movement speed. And then you have high attack speed as well. Let's say you happen to have a bard, right? You're a bard main. You have alt bards. I would invest on high level gem and save your money buying spec accessories to have optional build to save the gold. Because gems can be changed, but accessories can't. So let's say you're a main bard. Invest into the high level gems first, and then you save more money on the accessories by playing a high swift build instead of max swift build. The best case scenario for me is playing full swift build and high gems, which is what I have right now. I have so much room, not making a mistake, and it's so comfortable, and I always get the highest grade of a support MVP. Again, with the cons a little bit, it's the same thing. You have some empty time frames if there's too little swift, as I showed you guys, right? This is the same case for shields as well. If you played the 100% shield, you have about 1 to 2 seconds empty time frame. And it's more difficult and less comfortable to keep the attributes up. What is the attributes, chat? The attribute is uptime on attack buffs, uptime marking, and uptime shields. Not much on the marking section because your harp is up, and then you use your sonatine to like gathering up anyways. So your marking is pretty much up all the time. It's actually up a lot more than you think because the harp is pretty smart. It aims pretty well. The concept, again, lack of mana, but not as much as the full swift build, because full swift builds spam a lot more skills faster. But conviction judgment or with mana engraving, or conviction judgment with mana food is pretty much mandatory, or your skills won't rotate. Bard has become a high mana cost class now, so that, like I said before, I switched my engraving to max MP. And the lastly, requires higher level gem. Therefore, if you're a Bard main, invest on high level gems. If you do, your ult bards can be can save a lot of gold by buying spec accessories for maybe like a ring or earring, and you can rotate pretty well and have the pros for faster identity generation with a little bit more efficiency on the buffs. So these are the good stuff that you can get. So it's like a same thing. But if you have a low level gem and then go for like a cheap build for like this, the problem is you're not going to take advantage of it.